Our next session is a UIBS Distinguished Company session, application of AI and IoT in manufacturing. And for the first time, Georgia Pacific team is working with UIBS and Georgia Tech Global Business Forum to make this fantastic session presentation. I welcome Mr. Paul Frederickson, Senior Vice President of Georgia Pacific Operations Technology Solutions Group. Hello, Paul. Hi, Paul. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good morning.
Good morning. Wonderful. Hi, Roshan. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Wonderful. And Ms. Surya Koppireddy. Surya, good morning. Great, wonder. Over to you, Paul.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for kind of the opportunity to take a minute and talk and share with you today. I think we do this a fair amount, and honestly, every time we do it, I think getting ourselves together to kind of put our thoughts together and frame up where we're headed and where we are is helpful for us. So I thank you for that. For both of the organizations, I think that have sponsored this particular event, we've got a pretty deep connection. And I think in the course of some questions that Roshan and Surya will handle today, we'll try to kind of show you how that works. Some context for the first couple minutes here, and then, kind of we'll get into the application discussion. We spent since about April of 2018 inside of Georgia Pacific, which is kind of a wholly owned component of Coke with the K Industries, building a capability to profitably apply technology inside of our operations. Couple important words there. Profitably is one, and application is the other. And so you typically don't think of the paper industry as where some of that innovation and push would come from. I think we've been very fortunate to be a part of the two parent companies we are, Georgia Pacific and Coke, and also fortunate to be in the location we are in Atlanta, close to Georgia Tech. Our first location was Abercrombie and Spring Street, which is about a block and a half from the Georgia Tech bookstore. And so recruiting has been very easy for us. Retention has been good for us, and the relationships we've had with some of the engineering departments at Georgia Tech have actually enabled some of the work that we've done. As a company, Georgia Pacific is 3 different business units, roughly 140 facilities, primarily in North America, that we work with, and out of a location we call the lab in West Midtown, Atlanta. We are connected to those 140 facilities in real time, 24/7. With that, of course, we get some economies of scale. And so when we talk a little bit about what we've done and how we've done it, those 140 facilities allow us to do things, cause us to do things different than entities with 1 or 2 or 3 facilities. We've also started to assimilate in some of our partners or colleagues inside of Coke. Guardian Glass has 14 facilities across 4 continents, and starting in 2020, we've pulled them into this process we'll talk about. And so they're really part of the family now, and you wouldn't see them treated or look or feel any different than the 140 facilities inside of Georgia Pacific. Little context there, about a third of those facilities are making lumber, plywood, oriented strand board, wallboard. About a third of them are making either brown boxes or mailers for Amazon and companies like that. And about a third of them are making consumer products. So Angel Soft bath tissue, many of the products you would see at a Costco store. So we have a pretty wide breadth of products, facilities, and locations. The underlying premise for what we were forged or forced into, I think, offered the opportunity is the simple loss of experience across manufacturing in North America. A typical control room for us might have had 200 years of service in it if you had 5 people, each with across 4 shifts. It would typically be hundreds of years of experience that would be sitting in those chairs running the operation. If you look now, same people, same number of people, it might be less than 12 years of experience. And so sort of our challenge has been, can we use technology, specifically automation and AI, to help people who have maybe some of the knowledge, but nowhere near the experience, be successful, safe, productive in our manufacturing environments. And that's really been what we've been working on since 2018, 2019. Now, to a question from the prior discussion, can a CFO see those benefits? The answer is they can. But those benefits are both accretive and non-accretive. The accretive ones are relatively easy to see. The non-accretive benefits, you have to appreciate and take into account some of the headwinds, like that loss of talent and experience. So in some cases, running equal equipment efficiencies in 2024 to what was being done in 2016 is a pretty significant accomplishment. So we have seen and continue to see benefits at multiples of our cost structure on both the accretive and the non-accretive side. In simple terms, everything we do here is really in the essence of recognize issues and help with the response to those issues via AI. Less about that with automation. And so what does that mean? It means see things early when they're small, help connect the dots of what might appear to be relatively independent issues that experience would guide somebody to see becomes a more important, more complex, more costly problem, and then finally guide the behavior. And that's where Roshan and Surya can talk to you a little bit about how we think about generative AI and how we stack generative AI. That I guess the new term for that might be agentic AI, but I think we still think about it as using large language models to help guide the behavior or the response for operators. Scale for us, we run about 800 autonomous vehicles around our system as we sit here this morning. We started doing that in 2000, so that's not a new phenomena for us. The pace of that has grown as, finding people to do that work has become more difficult, and I think it continues to grow. In our more complex operations, we focus the AI on what we call reliable operation, and that's simply take care of the assets, take care of the process, take care of the process control equipment. Digital mezzanine is our intellectual property. It's something that is, we believe, unique to what we've been able to create here. That is a tool that sits literally on top of the PLCs in an operating environment and pulls data in real time. That's done elsewhere. What we believe is unique is the way we integrate that with AI, with cameras, with generative AI to see things that are happening, trends that are evolving, and guide people's behavior. And then measure the same math that we do on the two above. We've applied directly to inexpensive cameras, and we found them to be, again, another tool to help us recognize and then guide response. The investment here, probably the simplest way to do it, is what started in April of 2018 at about 4 FTEs is now about 150 people that are kind of domiciled out of this building here in the lab in West Midtown. That's a combination of data scientists, IT professionals, core engineers, mechanical, chemical, electrical. I guess that would be the predominance or preponderance of it. Process control engineers too, to the extent that you think about that as a discipline. Has it created value? I think the consensus is yes. We've spent a fair amount of time benchmarking inside and outside of our industry. It is one of the foundations of a Coke company is kind of know what's out there. And I think we find that we legitimately, with humility, can say we believe we are a ways down the field, maybe when compared to either our peers or others that we have benchmarked with. That's not because we're particularly smart or anything like that. It's, I think, more that we've been afforded the opportunity to come at this problem with a company that has scale. So instead of buying point solutions, Roshan and Surya will talk to you about building solutions, whereas the problems get more valuable or the opportunities, we can integrate different tools together in minutes with questions and looking for answers, as opposed to trying to have the need to integrate purchase solutions that take time and money. And I think the other important thing that it would be important to talk about here is the scale and the reliability we run at. There are about 650 escalations that come out of this building a week to those 140 facilities. And as operations start to depend on those as a part of their operating strategy, this building then has to run 24/7 by 365, because when it doesn't, some of those insights that people had learned to rely on cease to be available to them. And so it has taken us from somewhat of a minimum viable product to a scaled solution to something that now is sort of integral to how most of our Georgia Pacific facilities run their day-to-day operations. So that's the context. I thought what we might do quickly is give this over to Roshan to talk a little bit about how we've approached this and why we've approached it the way we did. And then that will follow with Surya taking a run through just literally what does that look like at scale, so people get a sense for that. So I think, Roshan, if you want to take and introduce yourself and go from here, when we hand back off to Surya, we'll do the same thing.
Sounds good. Thanks, Paul. Morning, everybody. My name's Roshan Shah. I have responsibility for data science and a capability we call CSC, Collaboration and Support Center. It's an operating entity for all intents, and that's how we apply AI across Georgia Pacific. That said, to build on to what Paul talked about, we think of every opportunity in front of us where we could apply AI in terms of use cases. And it's deliberately thought of as use cases. So if we start with a problem and we can make some progress in 6 weeks, or lesser, somewhere around that, then we can have a perspective around, does this actually create value for us? And if not, let's determine, are we the right group of folks? Should we be partnering? Something to that effect. And the reason we put 6 weeks as a timeline is because we, dramatically care about the importance of speed, rather. In all of the things that we go down the path of, speed matters to us. And with that as a backdrop, when we think about where could we apply AI to start with, a couple of use cases. Number one would be what we call reliable operations. Reliable operations is a kind of a house that sits on a couple of pillars, 3 to be precise. The first one would be mechanical or electrical asset health, the second one being process health, and the third one being process control health. And if we dive into each one of those, what that effectively means for us is, we used to have a lot of folks who could walk around and listen to the sound of a bearing moving and be able to tell us that bearing's got this type of problem. Well, that took a lot of knowledge and, more importantly, experience. But as we no longer have that skill set in our facilities, what we've been able to do is leverage sensors, vibration sensors, if you will, thousands of them, north of 75,000 of them, that are constantly collecting data for us. And Surya will get into how we do that at scale. But from an AI standpoint, what we do is we apply machine learning models against those massive amounts of data that we produce to be able to identify what's going to fail, what's the failure mode, and how much time we have. And all 3 of those are important, perhaps in that order. Now, the value proposition for us is when we apply machine learning models against those incredibly large volumes of data, now we can call a facility and share the fact that, hey, that particular bearing or equipment is going to fail for this reason, and you have this amount of time. When we connect that to the fact that we no longer have the experience in our facilities to be able to identify that, this is very helpful, because now facilities don't have to take an equipment down in an unplanned manner. Now they know what's going to fail. So, again, with lack of experience and knowledge, that becomes a very valuable data point for facilities to be able to keep mechanical assets running well. The second pillar of that reliable operations is process health. And what we mean by that is when we used to have a lot of operators with, as Paul mentioned, 200 years worth of experience, where we might be lucky if we get combined of, 5 years of experience. Operators, not for any poor intent, but operators tend to make, decisions that may not be the best decisions because, again, they don't have the knowledge and the experience. Or you might be able to replace knowledge. Experience, unfortunately, just takes time. So in that case, what we do is we deploy thousands of machine learning models that are constantly executing against real-time data that these, thousands of sensors generate to be able to help flag to us, including the facility, that would suggest something to the effect of, hey, the temperature in this particular kiln is at X, and it is increasing at a rate that may be a little too aggressive. And if we were to back off of that, or if we were to, do things differently, we have a better chance of not getting an off-quality product, or God forbid, get into an unsafe condition. So in other words, being able to leverage AI and sensor data, we can get ahead of well-intentioned but inaccurate decision from a process standpoint and get ahead of those failures. To us, that has a fairly large economic impact, but of course, that has a safety and environmental impact that we aim to avoid. The third component of reliable operation is process control health. And what I mean by that is, in our facilities, we have a fair bit of automation around how equipment kind of runs itself, if you will. For maybe a analogy or metaphor might be cruise control. Well, those equipment and those settings need to be monitored and they need to be updated based on changing conditions. So what we do is we'll apply machine learning and data on top of that data of the process control data to be able to identify, is it running the way it should be? Is it running too aggressively, not aggressively enough? Does it have the right sensor data? Is it tuned properly, etc.? Historically, we've thought of these three things: asset health, and process control health, and kind of like parallel lines. What we've been able to do is recognize the impact, interdependence of those three capabilities, and we now think of that as reliable operations. And that's important, maybe for no other reason than just this. What we've learned is about 40 to 50% of our assets fail ahead of its time, infant mortality or otherwise, because of the way that those assets are run. Again, not for any ill intent, it's just purely lack of knowledge and experience. If we can marry process health data with asset health data, vibration data, etc., then we can get ahead of those failures, and we can get ahead of just even ending up on a failure curve, if you will. So that's at a large is our first use case, and again, as I mentioned, we use heavy amount of machine learning data in there. The second application,
you might take a minute and just kind of talk a little bit about the evolution of some of those asset health models, because those are organically built. Yeah. And I think there were some folks inside of the mechanical engineering department at Georgia Tech, and a couple students that I think we worked with for a couple of years to build some of those capabilities that I think are truly probably unique to just about anybody other than branches, maybe of our military.
Yeah.
And they've provided value to us that I think are sort of unique inside of the company. And I think we see that when we benchmark.
Absolutely. So to maybe dive a little deeper on what Paul just mentioned. So when we first started with this problem statement, we kind of scoured the marketplace in terms of, hey, is this something that we could buy? And very quickly we recognized the answer that either not what we were looking for, not what we need, or not at our scale, or simply just not available, period. That's when we actually started partnering with Georgia Tech, as well as going through an internal development process in collaboration to build these models, if you will. And, we probably spent first 3 months and we had a version ready that kind of blew our minds. It had, certainly a large proportion of false positives and we were missing a few things. But iteratively, we were able to build some models that, frankly, till this day, we can't buy in the marketplace. And I think if not for, a couple of professors in the mechanical engineering department at Georgia Tech, and specifically remember 6 students that worked with us, I'm not entirely sure we would have met our goal as quickly as we needed to. So that's been pretty powerful, and an example we hold pretty close to how we operate here. The beauty in going through that process was, as we built them, we used them, and that was valuable. Even when they were only, say, arguably 30% accurate, that's an important perspective. If we can use what we have, even at 30%, parse out the 30% that is truly accurate and matters, and if we can use that, A, we build organizational momentum, people start believing in it, and B, we start actually seeing that in the P&L. So to earlier point around, do CFOs see value? Well, if we start using what we have, I think we can start seeing value. But as a data scientist, what was valuable for us is, of the 70% that was not accurate, because people were looking at it, they could give us feedback to say, hey, here's where that's not accurate. And then we can iteratively build that better. And, today, when we look at our mature models, it's far more accurate than where we started. And again, I think Georgia Tech played a huge part in kind of helping us get there. I'll just quickly move on to maybe a second and third use case. That was the first one. Again, very profitable, very valuable for us. The second one, that we've been pouring a lot of energy in is computer vision, particularly in the realm of safety as well as quality. 30,000 employees across 140 manufacturing facilities. Being able to safely operate our equipment matters. And this is where we use computer vision. I think we have north of 600 cameras that are constantly collecting data and running against NVIDIA GPUs at our facilities to be able to identify, are people in an unsafe condition? An unsafe condition, is determined by, are they wearing hard hats? Are they, in an area where there's vehicles moving? Or are they in an area where the equipment itself may be energized? And if so, we have the ability to stop the equipment automatically, as well as be able to alert the employee, not in a punitive manner, but more so for training perspective. That's a safety application. In a similar manner, in computer vision, we also deploy a lot of quality applications. So if we're running our processes in a manner that may lead to suboptimal quality or speed or what have you, we're able to use relatively inexpensive cameras in conjunction with process control to be able to change our processes within 200 milliseconds and be able to avoid an unplanned event, avoid a jam up, avoid speed loss, etc. And that's probably one of our largest growing opportunity in the computer vision state. The third one I'll very quickly talk about is generative AI. Of course, it's, we as an organization have been using AI for quite some time. Generative AI has certainly made it easier for us to use it at scale. Where we find it pretty valuable for us is when we tune our own models built on top of AWS Bedrock, it lets us kind of reduce hallucination. That's been pretty important. But orchestrating that information has been one of the pillars of value proposition for us. Maybe the last point I'll mention, I'll transition over to Surya to give us a little more color in how we do this work at scale. We use generative AI as a way to guide behaviors. And what I mean by that is, I mentioned the fact that we use machine learning models to inform our operators on how they may want to, change the knob, if you will. In this case, using generative AI, we can add context in an autonomous manner, such that we can put in front of an operator and say, hey, you're doing X, please consider doing Y at this time by this rate, such that we get to an optimal condition. And we call it guided behavior. I think that's a kind of an industry term. Last point on that is a valuable piece from an operations standpoint is, in lieu of having that generative AI, somebody would have to assimilate all of that information and be able to put that in front of the operator. A, that's time consuming. B, that's costly. And C, I'm not entirely sure we'd be able to do it at scale. So the fact that we can use generative AI to be able to put all of that together and offer an operator a corrective action or guided behavior, if you will, in real time at speed, that's been very valuable to us. So those are the three use cases amongst many that we use AI on. I'll actually pass it off to Surya to maybe give us introduce yourself, but B, give us a much deeper look into the scale and how we actually do the things that we just mentioned.
Thanks, Roshan.
I'm responsible.
Sorry, introduce yourself again, please.
I'm Surya Koppireddy. I'm responsible for data engineering and model engineering for all the use cases we talked about. Our journey with data and processing, it started when we engaged initially with the users. And on day one, we did not process all the data, but it grew eventually. Over a period of 5 years, we've accumulated about 5 petabytes of data. On a daily basis, we process trillions of data. This data comes from a lot of assets and facilities. We have about 150 facilities, and data comes from multiple sensors, various varieties of data types. It comes from about 75,000 odd sensors. Talking through how the data moves and processes for all the use cases that Roshan was talking about, we have different solutions we've built, but most of the times what we focus on is building a solution that's scalable, reliable, because end of the day, we want to deliver the results to the users. They rely on them. For the first use case that Roshan talked about, which was the reliability, we get variety of data. It could be waveforms or trends, which would be small data with a lot of velocity, or it could be large data sets which come at a less cadence. And we are processing this data using cloud technologies. We use AWS, a variety of services of AWS. We also use services like Kubernetes, EKS to process some of these data elements and deliver the results to the end users. For the second use case for the other use case around computer vision, this one we cannot rely on cloud because those are image processes, video processes that have to be done, and they have to be done very quickly at the facility to deliver the insights for people to react to it or for the processes to adjust and accommodate and move forward from there. So we use a combination of devices. We call them the edge devices. That's where we run all our processing to deliver those insights.
I guess one of the things you might just mention a little bit is, I mean, obviously I'm the person that's been around a long time here. So I don't know that we were smart enough to have envisioned what we would be running into as opportunities over the last almost 7 years now. But I would tell you that the capabilities that Surya and her team bring have allowed us to simply walk in the morning and say, we'd like to take our asset health data and we'd like to bump it up against our process health data and see if we can figure out why we're wrecking this equipment. Run a pump off a pump curve. You can't do that for long before you tear it up. And I think her and her team's ability to take that as a question and just walk 20 feet down the hall and come back in 3 hours and say, well, we can do it. Here's what it means. Let's try it here. And so we go back to the small scale use case, validate we can do it, see if we like it. If it's like, yeah, that worked well, then we can scale it. That has avoided for us spending tens of millions of dollars on data lakes. It's also allowed us to sort of earn as we go. But compared to some of our benchmarking, and maybe this was a bit of good fortune, maybe a lot of good fortune, we haven't found ourselves blocked or boxed in by solutions that we have to write complicated APIs or other things to communicate and get our data where we need it. To the point now where that's almost the first question we have of anybody that wants to work with us is, where's the data going to reside? Can we get our hands on it? And frankly, there are only a few people in this company we really want to pass judgment on that. And you're listening to one of them, because you almost have to be able to open up a laptop and know a lot about what's going on in order to trust the answers to those questions. But for anybody that was seeking to build a capability that was going to be central to how you operate, getting folks who can really understand how the data needs to move and flow and then get released, I couldn't emphasize enough, because it's one thing for us to have problems and identify them. It's another thing to write models. But if the data behind it doesn't work fast and reliably and sort of flexibly, it doesn't matter. And so those three things, I think, are sort of unique in things that we have seen with people as large as Ford Motor Company and others that I think we've been able to take advantage of.
Yeah, the notion of data virtualization, that's been quite powerful and quite important for us. You want to talk about that story real quick?
So we don't go around trying to gather data, build data lakes before we start our modeling. We try to work with the data wherever it resides and make the insights as quickly as possible. And that talks through the journey we've been through. For some of our use cases, we have relied on data that's available from the vendor cloud. We get it and use it. For some, we just to use it where it resides, like for a computer vision edge cases. The data resides at the edge. We use it and process it there itself to get the insights. So that way we are reducing the time to build a data lake, get all the data, build in all the pipelines to make sure things work. And manufacturing data at the volume at which and the velocity at which it comes, it's very hard to ensure we are getting the right data at the right pace. So it helps having that data virtualization, be able to consume it quickly and get insights quickly so the users can benefit from it sooner.
So if we've kind of covered a little bit of the why and the what and the how, I guess one of the hows we thought we might take a minute to talk a little bit of is the talent position we have here. You know, if you go back to that 150 folks that are sort of resident here, I would say half of them probably have a connection with the Georgia Tech University, and another 40 to 50%, you know, with some form of historical heritage, with a background around the country of India. And so I think we've got an environment where, you know, as we think about some of the purposes of the group that's sort of sponsored this event, you can come down here on most any day, and, you know, the environment has to be an environment that people want to work at. I think it has to be a place that folks are motivated and challenged and inspired to work. And it has to be a place where, you know, that isn't just a hiring point. It's something that continues through, you know, their career, through years, so that it's one challenge followed by another challenge, followed by another challenge, or retention is not very good. And we've been very fortunate here, I think, again, through some benchmarking. Our regrettable losses out of this organization are still something you can count on about two hands over the 6 or 7 years. And so I thought it might be good, Roshan, maybe you and Surya, each from your own perspective, talk a little bit about the talent position, how we got here, and how we've been successful kind of with keeping the talent focused on opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a critical point in all of this. Without kind of talent, we are not going to move very fast, of course. So a key component of being able to recruit and retain talent, beyond the fact that we're fortunate to be right next to Georgia Tech, it's been the fact that we've been able to offer these folks with valuable problems that they can work on, that it's, you know, it's a challenging problem. They feel they're part of a team that's working on solving for this. And it's not readily that we could just kind of go download, if you will. So it's intriguing problems that folks can work on. Folks want to use it. And then we're able to actually see it be used when we walk into our facilities, when we obviously see that in our P&L, and the fact that, you know, people are recognized for it. That's been, in more than one way, a breath of fresh air for us to be able to, you know, fortunate to have this lab, if you will. We're in this environment with about 75,000 square foot of area. And much of that is kind of an empty warehouse where we can go and try different things. Sitting in you know, many organizations where folks don't have the ability to go from thinking of an idea to going and buying a few parts and being able to trial that. I think all of us at some point kind of experience that in grad school in a lab environment, and then we kind of lose that in a corporate culture. And what's been very unique for us at GP and Coke, it's we're empowered. We obviously think about it through the lens of net present value and how does this all translate into um, business opportunities for us. But being able to try it, being able to empower folks with various backgrounds and educational backgrounds, cultures, if you will, to be able to say, here's an actual business problem. How would you go solve for it? And let's do that right here, sitting across a large warehouse where we can go and plug some of these devices in a safe environment, um, and being able to try that out. That's been very valuable. Folks like that. We have robots here. We have self-guided vehicles. We have vibe sensors connected to pumps that we can go and try to break it, try to emulate what a failure may look like. Partner directly with our facilities to say, here's what we're seeing. Does that seem reasonable? And they kind of spend time over here. The ability to do all of that with the diverse group of talent we have here, I think is unique, and it contributes to our folks who want to be part of this, who find fulfillment in it, and kind of stay over a long period of time. And that again, I think, is very unique. I want to talk a little more about the humans in the loop piece. But Surya, anything you want to add to that from your team?
What I've experienced is the changes we've seen with people, process, and technology. When we started, the technology we were looking for and the place where Georgia Pacific was marketed and branded, it was different from where we stand today. And that's what we've seen people experience as well as they move along with us. So when we started initially, when I had conversations with people at Georgia Tech, they were not even familiar that Georgia Pacific would be operating at the scale on on the technology platforms of cloud. So it was different compared to how long we've come now with the partnership. There's a lot of awareness on what we do. We use a lot of cloud technologies, everything that's available in AWS, latest and greatest we've used and incorporated, and we've been able to successfully use that to our advantage to build the solutions we've built today. And everybody on our team, I think, have experienced that because it's not like a stale problem. We have a problem, we solve it, and we are done. There is more value that can be created every day, and everybody is involved in that value creation. That's where people find fulfillment. And they have access to the technology as well to build the solutions. Like Gen AI is out in the market, we are experimenting with it. There's computer vision that's going, we are experimenting with it. And we are using it, and we have users who are benefiting from those. So end of the day, you find that fulfillment when you build a solution and you have those users to use it, adopt it, and they are finding those things meaningful. That's where it makes a lot of people feel fulfilled.
You talk about wanting to, have everybody involved in the outcome of building a car that gets out on the road and runs, as opposed to some people build door handles, some people build windshield wipers. And so I think we've tried really hard to keep people connected to the outcome, not just a specific subset of the problems. I guess the other thing you might mention, one of the two of you, is I also think we get a lot of AWS's attention for experiments and trying things because they believe if they bring them to us, we will actually put them up against a real life problem out in the wild, not a hypothetical problem. And so some of the stuff that we've seen come to us from them around, agentic AI, around large language models and how we use their large language model tools, I think they've sought us out because I think they're confident that if there is a fit, we'll tell them. If there isn't, we'll tell them. That's right. If there is, it's going to get some reps in out in the wild, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point. To actually illustrate on that, one of the when Gen AI first kind of came into the marketplace and everybody pretty excited about it, AWS partnered with us to say, hey, do you guys have a problem where you could apply? And we were kind of scratching our heads thinking, it's a large language model. We kind of work in manufacturing where we have a lot of sensor data that produce numbers. How do we work on that? And we partnered with AWS, and within 90 days, we were able to build some capability inside of the four walls of AWS collectively, such that we can apply large language models against numbers. And that's a very unique new advantage that I think AWS and Georgia Pacific, we were able to create. What that means for us is typically when you want to apply Gen AI against a problem, you better have Word documents or files where you can consume and ask it questions. ask it questions that would give you answers in words, versus being able to say, well, I noticed an example might be, I noticed my kiln is not running optimally. What might be going on? And instead of you getting a theoretical or a literature, you might we actually get, well, it seems like you're running this process at this set point, and you should be running it over here. And if you were able to increase this gradually over the next 2 hours and get it from X to Y, you will get to a very specific, you'll get to the desired state. Now that may seem trivial, but to be able to take AWS's large language model and apply that against real-time IoT data and get very specific corrective action in the context of our equipment, that I think remains a competitive advantage. And if not for kind of the cultural advantages we have in being able to work on real problems that matter, I'm not sure that we would have gotten the attention that we do from the likes of AWS. To this day, I think we kind of get the feedback that would say Georgia Pacific and Coke are some of the largest users of AWS in an industrial form. And, as a function of that, kind of everything we've talked about, that we get a lot of support and partnership from the likes of AWS. I'm not sure, sir, if you would add to that.
One of the things that we challenge about AWS is when they get the concept, we adopt it, we are able to do the MVP, make it work quickly. But then we also have the scale of data and the scale of use cases. That's where they probably would not have experimented until they come to Georgia Pacific. That's where the partnership has been very successful, where AWS had to evolve to meet the challenge and make the solution scalable. And we were able to use the concept and innovate pretty quickly from the MVP phase to a full-blown out solution where we can leverage it across all facilities. So it's both a win-win solution for them to be able to find somebody who's eager to adopt, who's able to leverage the technology, the innovation, and create value. And for us, we've been able to work with a partner who's flexible enough to take the feedback we've provided and make changes quickly, so we can go as fast as we want to once we see a successful solution.
Absolutely.
So the what, the why, I guess if I maybe take 2 minutes and finish, and then we'll hand it back for any questions. The enterprise has been in place since early 2018. Across our 100 facilities now, we're fairly heavily integrated just about everywhere. It's easier to keep track of those that we're not than where we are. Started to move this outside of Coke. Or outside of GP to other parts of Coke. We've actually started to talk about taking this maybe even outside of the four walls of Coke a little bit. The value, I think, is measurable. It's measurable both in accretive and non-accretive terms, and I think we feel very comfortable that it's advantaged for us against the headwinds of loss of experience, which is hard to replace. You can augment knowledge, but experience is different. And I think if you said where are we focused next, I think that the focus for me is how do we integrate more discrete models and more discrete tools into more holistic solutions for our operating teams. So if we look at 5-unit operations that kind of flow together through a pipe or connect through a conveyor, the question now is, can we start to stitch some of those sub-processes together into an overall unit operation and recognize the problems, guide the response, and ultimately close the loop and just write back to an APC? And so we've got some opportunities for that. It takes what would be a standard advanced process control or APC and starts to make it maybe more nuanced, more capable. And so I think if you look at us over the next year or two, and we really don't try to project out much more than that because this world changes so fast, I think it's starting to stitch some of the smaller solutions together into more holistic solutions so that we can do even a better job at recognition and response, stabilize the operation, make it easier for our people to run it, and ultimately make us more profitable. That would be kind of our overarching direction and mandate. And, we try to measure those things in small steps that we can ensure that we're moving on. I think Roshan said this earlier, and I'd end with this. Our greatest enemy in this building is speed, because the gravitational pull to kind of slow down and do things, especially as we've grown bigger, requires, I think, a constant vigilance and a push that says, are we moving at the pace that's consistent with our opportunity? If we are, that's good. If we're not, then we need to kind of understand why. And oftentimes we look in the mirror and we find it's ourselves. We've grown to the point where we've kind of taken a bit of the edge off, and it's sort of with leadership teams down here objective to keep their eye on that and make sure that we're pushing to profitable speed, not reckless speed. So I think that's what we would have to share with you today.
Fantastic presentation, Paul, Roshan, and Surya. It is really very heartening to learn how a big enterprise like yourself is getting engaged in these aspects of AI and technology solutions. We have a couple of questions, and I would like to invite John also to join me here. John?
Yep.
There? Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. So my first question to Paul, you and the group is that how much of these applications of AI and IoT your partners, your vendors have been able to adopt, absorb, or adopting? And what is the process? Because I'm sure there are hundreds and thousands of vendors you're working with. So where are they in terms of these processes?
In terms of devices, I'll just be honest and transparent with you. In terms of devices, there are vendors who I think understand what we're trying to do and want to be a part of it. And with that alignment, we get engaged with them on the front end so that the way that data moves into Surya's world is understood and it's reliable and we can deal with it. There are other vendors, not a trivial number though, where we really challenge the business model, because they may sell the sensor or give away the sensor, but what they really want is the ongoing annuity of, looking at that data for a supplier or for a customer, writing an API to pass the data back to the customer. And we're sort of at odds a bit with that because of our scale. It's not because we necessarily think we're smarter or better, but with 140 facilities, we figure out how to deal with rotating equipment in one facility. We've got 139 other opportunities. And so I think the supply base sort of bifurcates or separates pretty quickly, to be honest with you, between folks who see that as part of their business model and some that don't. And some very good suppliers that we work with that we like just say, we don't. And we're okay with that. Where we get in trouble is where we're thinking one thing or they're saying one thing and we're finding ourselves not in the same place. But it has narrowed our supply base, I think, is the honest comment I would give you for people who feel like what we're doing is something they want to be a part of. Would you guys see that any differently?
No, I think that's very well said. Maybe one I would add to that is, there is a obviously, with the advent of AI at scale, everybody wants to kind of jump on that because that's kind of the way of the future. What we end up finding at times is solution that may not be any better than what you might be able to do just by spending some time on Stack Overflow or on Google. In instances as that, what we found is when we are upfront in terms of collectively where we are and where we want to be, what partnership may look like, such that we could co-develop it, if you will. I think having honest conversations about that early on has been helpful. Otherwise, what we kind of end up getting into, unfortunately, is we go into a partnership to go build something, and then we recognize, okay, well, we may not be where we thought we were, and that's okay. We just need to, kind of figure out collectively where we want to be and kind of drive towards that. I think that where we've had those conversations early on, that partnership has been phenomenal. We talked a lot about what we're doing with AWS, and there's a whole host of them that we work with that, that partnership has been very good. So we can develop our configure something collectively.
And my second part of that question would be is that you are under the family of coach companies, right? Now, how do you take your lessons, your learning lessons, failure lessons to other partners of coach family enterprises?
So there's a pretty structured forum across the Coke enterprise that meets about every 6 weeks, and we try to be just as transparent as we possibly can to answer your question. And generally, my principle is we start with what hasn't worked because everybody's inclined to talk about what has, and so we tend to talk about things we tried that failed or missed opportunities. But across the enterprise, that is done with a lot of discipline on a pretty strict calendar, and we take it pretty seriously because we learn things, of course, from others, and we want to share what we've tried. Again, primarily what hasn't worked. Now, our businesses are somewhat different, so not everything that we do in GP is universally applicable, but we pretty much know what is. So computer vision would be an example. Things we're doing with computer vision fit pretty well across most of the other companies. And so that information, we get something, we like it, we share it. We get something, we say, well, that wasn't any good, we share it. And we do it multiple times a year, many times a year.
Yeah. Good, thanks. John?
Yes, I have a more generic question, if I may. Great presentation, of course, and I hope it can be used in various classrooms and seminars later. It's a sort of, it's a question I asked earlier today to UPS. How quickly do IT investments show business value? Business value from the point of view of a CFO, because often CFOs, at least in the literature generically about IT improvements, enhancements, find it very slow in showing value.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that to be the case in your corporate structure? And how do you handle it? And how do you plead your case internally?
So one of the reasons we're so focused on speed, John, is for that very purpose. If we're working on something that takes a year or two to show up, our term for that is it's a lifetime achievement award, and we don't do those very well. And so part of what we try to do is pick problems that are definable and measurable. And if the surrogate for if I can't see it show up at the bottom of my P&L, and let's be honest, in a big company our size, if you think about our NIAT at the end of the year, you got to move something 8 or 9 figures if you're really going to definitively say you're going to see it. But what we can do is we can identify the performance metrics, KPIs, whatever term you choose, that give people confidence that it is either accretive and valuable or non-accretive, but still valuable. And I don't want to be working on anything down here if we haven't defined the problem clearly and we don't know what we're measuring for either success or failure, because that's a dangerous place to be. I'm not going to lie and say we haven't done it once or twice, but we do it with full awareness and disclosure, and it's a dangerous place. It's a dangerous game to start, because if it gets away from us, then a year from now we'll be saying, well, we did all this wonderful work, and somebody will say, what was it worth? But the short answer is our mantra is kind of, if we can't find measurable value in 90 days via our KPIs that everybody agrees to, then we may be working on the wrong thing. Or it's so small that it's really not going to turn into anything material.
Yeah. Right. I had a related question, and I think you have actually dealt with it, but I wanted to clarify it in my mind. I guess you have an education function or a training function, upstream and downstream, with your users, with your customers, clients, and with your suppliers network. How do you systematically address the question of training? it's almost a bit of a preaching kind of situation in a sense, but also there are technical aspects and harmonization of systems that are at play, I would imagine.
That is all true. And again, being honest with you, I think at times I feel like we're intentional about that and we're ahead of it. And at times we look up and we say, yeah, we missed that. The way it usually plays out to us is we're engineers by trade, by general qualification in many cases. And so we're reluctant to want to talk about things until we know it's going to work, right? I mean, this notion of fail fast sounds cliche, but engineers, my experiences, don't like to fail. And we sure don't like to talk about it if we fail. And so I think trying to figure out how to build a communication strategy around where we're going, both internal to the company, but equally important external, has been something that when we started off, it probably didn't matter that much. Now that we're the size we are and we're kind of impacting the facilities, we have to be very intentional about it. I would give us probably a B letter grade on it, but we're cognizant of it. And I think trying to figure out how to get further in front of it, because otherwise we get surprises. And most often if we're surprised, it's because of our lack of communication. Yeah. So I think you're on a topic that is on our list of how do we slow down our thought process, not our results process, so that we are further in front of this, both with suppliers, partners, employees. I mean, it's the whole show.
Yeah. Let me speculate. I suspect your suppliers of core materials have a different mindset than your users, who may be ahead of the game. I mean, in some cases.
Yeah, I think you're.
I mean, in the game being, implementation of IT systems.
I think you're 100% right. And in a strange way, if you go to the other extreme, our employees, while we agonize over the loss of experience on the one hand, on the other hand, everybody that walks into a facility today, if you give them one of these and put the right information on it, they're all over it. They know how to use it. They'll tell you what works and what doesn't. And so part of the challenge for us too is to be able to think about the opportunity and not just the problem with the loss of experience, because there is an opportunity there. And if all we focus on is the problem, first, we demotivate a bunch of people. And second of all, we miss it. And so I think even in a very traditional industry where, we take in bales of waste paper or trees or chips, going out to our suppliers and helping them understand what we're trying to accomplish and why goes a long way. And sometimes we do a good job of that, and sometimes we're behind the ball.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
For our end users, though, when we build our solution, we try to make them as intuitive as possible, so they have the answers and they don't have to go through a lot of documentation and training to understand what is being delivered to them. We are using Gen AI and technologies as such to make it very easy for them to understand, so they don't have to go through a huge training session to consume the applications we're building for them.
Thank you, Surya. John, we have a question in the Q&A box from one of our audience, and I'm going to read it for the group. Question is from Mr. Mishra. Pine trees trunks with their long fibers are generally the raw stock for GP and other paper and paperboard manufacturers. It is fortunate that the pine can be replanted and reaches full maturity in 12 to 14 years to be reharvested. But these stocks are dwindling, as in pharmaceutical industries. Is GP doing AI-based research to genetically formulate the long pine fibers as an alternate source of raw material?
Boy, there's a lot in that question, and it's a good one. So, yeah, the short answer is yes. If you think about wood baskets, the hardwood wood basket is shrinking, and it's moving to South America, where the growing cycle is probably 7 to 8 years for things like eucalyptus, which is an important raw material in consumer-related products. The softwood basket, you had the growing cycle almost spot on. And then the question really becomes, what are the alternative fiber sources for long softwood? It's not Western brownwood for sure, because that growing cycle is quite long. There are a number of folks, both inside of the company and outside of the company that I think are studying that very carefully. Because of course, a softwood mill is an enormous investment and it's an enormous cost, and making sure that you're thinking about where that market is going is important. The use of softwood pulp, especially in all the different forms of absorbent fibers, adult incontinence, you name it, is a market that's very strong. And I don't think people have found necessarily a synthetic surrogate for that is acceptable yet. But there is a ton of research that goes into that topic for sure. And we're certainly a part of it.
Thank you. John?
Well, let me ask you a question on the recruitment side. You have praised Georgia Tech. Thank you. And it's directed at many of my colleagues in various engineering schools and industrial systems engineering, as well as our business school. But what do you look in a new prospective candidate for a job in your particular division or in your particular area? What are the
You want to take
features?
this?
Yeah, I'm sure yeah.
You want to
I
start, Surya?
noticed you had an MBA as well as a Master's of Science, I think in mechanical engineering, if I read right. I'm not sure in your case.
Yeah, no, mine was chemical, but
Okay.
why don't you take that, Surya, and then we can hand it back to Roshan. These two would be the most relevant ones to answer that, I think.
Yeah.
For us, we've hired a lot of folks from Georgia Tech and other colleges for data engineering and modeling engineering. What we look for is people who are enthusiastic, who want to come in, learn, and contribute to uh, building solutions. We provide a challenging environment so people who can align with those and deliver value. That's the kind of people we look for, people who can align to the vision and work as a team. The technology stack, I think, is pretty much aligned with what we use. We use a lot of cloud technology, Python programming, and all of those, which are basics that are taught at Georgia Tech. A lot of grads who come out of Georgia Tech have all of those acquainted. What we look for are more of the qualities of people coming in and working with us successfully.
Yeah, that's very well said. Inside the four walls of our company, right, what we refer to as principle-based management. It's kind of like our management philosophy, if you will. So from that standpoint, we look for folks who are good fit in that regard. But for in a simplified manner, what we look for folks who are willing to dive in and work on a problem, right? That's first and foremost. Second, folks who have the humility as well as a technical competence, right? Beyond kind of what you'd expect from a virtues and talent standpoint, but for folks who have the humility to actually jump in and say, I work in an environment where there are a lot of very smart people, and I've heard this saying, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Smart people, you can find a lot of smart people that you can work with, who can work with others and be able to bring them along, right? Have the humility to bring them along. I think that's kind of the unique skill set. And for us, we look for folks who are energetic, who are compassionate, who actually want to get moving and get something done, yet do that in a collaborative manner. I think that's a skill set that we look for, and we've been, again, fortunate in that area. I'm not sure, Paul, if you'd add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, there's the classic initiative, motivation, and stuff, but I do think both Surya and Roshan hit on a part. You're not going to find an office anywhere in the 75,000 square feet. And so, somebody who is locked in with headphones, heads down, I mean, there's a role for those type of people who are extremely smart as, lockdown individual contributors. We're much more fluid than that. And I guess we sort of believe that maybe the whole is greater than sometimes the sum of the parts. And so people have to be willing to work with others, have the humility and the diversity of thought to value others. We joke about the fact that some data scientists couldn't necessarily tell you the difference between a chlorine atom and a hydrogen atom, but I'm good with that because I can. But what they can tell us around anomaly detection and correlation and causation is so valuable that if you don't have an appreciation for what everybody brings to the party, and that
Right.
look, for a bunch of engineers, that's a hard thing sometimes for us to do. But when we get it right and you see it working, you literally just want to feed coffee sandwiches and get out of the way
Yeah.
because pretty cool stuff happens.
Right. So I have a related question, which actually has come from one of our audience, Professor C.P. Thackeray. The question is, how concerned are you about GP's ability to continue to recruit diverse talent from different countries slash cultures and remain competitive with proposed radical changes to our immigration laws? And please read this with the statement which was made by you, Paul or Roshan, that about 45 or 40% of your technical staff has some sort of relationship with India, either generation one or generation two.
Well, I would tell you, like everybody else, we're watching it pretty carefully. I mean, I think part of what's gotten us where we are is the diversity we have and the way people from different kind of backgrounds and cultures come together against problems. We're probably not going to be the ones to kind of stand up and say we don't agree with this. We're going to do something on our own.
Mm.
But we are paying pretty close attention to it, and I think to the extent that as a total enterprise, we see it the same way. I don't know that we're doing a lot right now other than paying close attention and listening. It's certainly not causing us to think we want to change what we're doing. I guess it's causing us to kind of watch and, hope that at the end of the day, we get to the right place.
Right. And as head of OTSG, what is your next frontier in terms of AI and these set of technologies for IoT? What's your next, where do you think you would be, or what would be your next challenge to deal with?
If I broke that question into continuous manufacturing and discrete, right? So discrete is the converting operations we have. Continuous would be the transformation of, let's just say, fiber into paper. I think on the discrete side, it would be how close could we push to sort of a lights out operation. On the automation side, between automation and robotics, that's the easy part. I think it's the variability and vagrancies in our raw materials and some of those things that humans are so good at seeing. But as computer vision gets better at defect detection, I think we would do that not as a cost savings. We would do it as a matter of survival. But I think trying to integrate those tools to let people work up to a higher purpose, and then if we can't find people we can still operate, would be my first comment. On continuous, I really think it's back to this problem recognition, problem response, and continuing to look at, instead of little pieces, more broad pieces of our operations. And then when we're comfortable, but probably not to start, we would just close the loop and run right back and write some of those recommended actions into our process control tools. So, think about a very complex APC or advanced process control. We could do that now in some of our facilities with some of our unit operations. I think Roshan's models are accurate enough, precision and recall good enough that we could do it. I think the question is, do we wait till we can see a broader part of the unit operation, or do we start to do it in little pieces? I think that the future then is taking AI and having it actually drive a level of control would be, what I would offer, so that you don't just use it for recognition and recommendation, you use it for control.
Great. Thank you. John?
I have no other questions other than a thought that your unit, excuse me, your unit sounds like it's on the tipping edge, or on the tip rather, of the process of modernization within the corporation.
It is. And the two bump into each other frequently, right? As we think about modernization or recapitalization, the tendency is to recapitalize what you've always had versus what you might want. And I think again, good question. As we get into some of those big decision points, the question is, how far do we want to push the envelope? And we have those discussions. The good news now is we actually have a relevant point of view about what the future might look like, whereas before we were very dependent just on our supply base to tell us that.
Well, thank you very much. Ani, you want to close the session?
Sorry, John, what was that?
I think we had set aside 11:55
Right.
as
So
the ending.
we are waiting for Mr. Anantadya to join us.
Okay.
In the meantime, you can have one more question with Paul and group.
Do you have facilities overseas? This is, of course, I'm a professor of international management, business, and strategy. So obviously, this is a question that comes to mind. Uh, and if so, where is your global footprint in terms of not so much selling, but operations?
So Georgia Pacific, no longer has a really global footprint, but Koch Industries does. And so early
Oh,
on, when I
yes, yeah.
to those Guardian facilities, they're in places that they're all over the world. And making, think about industrial glass, so building glass,
Yeah.
paints glass. Molex has facilities all over the world, as does Invista. So Coke as an enterprise,
Where is Anant?
big global footprint.
Yeah, well,
Uh, you are a very impressive company, and you are really part of the Georgia landscape. Uh, we, of course, as you know, uh, the Institute of Paper Science and Technology moved from Wisconsin to Georgia back in the 90s.
Mhm.
I'm curious, I'm not aware of the nature of the relationship, but I assume you are pretty closely linked with the Institute of Paper Science at the corner on 10th Street.
Yes, you would find. I think we've got probably 4 or 5 links, John, that are pretty tight. One is, there's a T&M technology and management program that
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
we've been a pretty heavy sponsor of. A lot of those folks end up in our supply chain space. Um, the Institute of Paper Chemistry for sure. We've actually got a number of folks that are down in your computer science program
Mhm.
and your data analytics. So I think we have 4 or 5 pretty good touch points. And I can't remember the mechanical engineering instructor. I think he left.
Dr. Kurfis.
Yeah, what was the name, Sadila?
Kurfis, I want to say.
Yeah, there was a Dr. Kurfis and a couple of his students. I think he's now moved out to someplace in.
Manufacturing. I
Yeah.
think the Manufacturing Institute. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think when we find specific problems, we've got a pretty good pathway to get to very specific people that, would be kind of interested in those problems. And it's not just on the data science side, it's probably 4 or 5 different places.
Yeah. Uh, and the paper industry, of course, is one of the key industries in Georgia as forestry. Do you see it impacted? It's really going beyond the scope of the presentation, but do you see it impacted by po- possible tariffs on the US side or on the other side?
I don't really know. I'd have to think about that. I don't know that I would have a straight up answer for you on that one, to be honest with you.
Only one that maybe is we export cellulose beyond North America, beyond US. So
Yeah, we do. I mean, I think that, yeah, certainly subsets of our business do move products. Yeah, probably some of the interactions and discussions around Canada and
Mhm.
therefore products industry would
Yeah.
be main to the things we're paying attention to.
Well, that's really a question of broad strategy for the corporation. And
That's
uh,
right.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot by asking that question, but it comes to mind, of course, in terms of trying to understand, assess the impact of potential tariffs on the Georgia economy and some of its key firms.
Yeah. No,
Um,
those questions started, probably about the 22nd of January, just in terms of
yes, yes,
where does that touch us? What does it mean for sure?
yeah. And we haven't touched much on sustainability, uh, the crossover between AI and new emerging technologies and sustainability. Broadly speaking, of course, sustainability has so many meanings. You could view it as ESG, or you could view it as decarbonation. But is this part of the agenda that you're pursuing in some ways? You pay some attention to it? Do you
Yeah,
build it in the equation as one of the variables?
Georgia Pacific across all businesses for sure. And
Yeah,
there are there is a specific group of folks who, that is their full-time job. We have not really had much of a of an impact or engagement yet on that subject, with the possible exception of water and water consumption.
yeah,
That is a place that, a pulp and paper mill is a large user of water.
yeah, yes,
And so that is a place that we've been engaged down here with our team in terms of both opportunity and optimization, and just sort of problem resolution and what's possible. Um, but it's really just been in that space. The rest of the sustainability initiative is driven by a different group over back at Georgia Pacific Corporate, um, and we've focused 95% of our time and attention has been focused on, as Roshan said, health and
yeah,
safety, reliable operation,
yeah.
productivity.
And are there any lessons uh, take away from your AI related practices that could apply to the other side of the company in sustainability?
you know,
In
I
terms of models, in terms of approaches, in terms of technologies, in terms of data gathering?
I think the one thing that, and I'd let Roshan or Surya jump in here too. Again, the notion of buying point solutions that then put four walls around what you can do with either data or models, to me, is always a watch out. We've had to take a few point solutions down. The fact that our data now kind of sits all available to us, whether directly or through virtualization, I think allows us to kind of not have to be overly precise about our work plans and what we're going to work on in 6 months or 8 months. Because when we think about it, if it's valuable, we can get our hands on the data. I think on the commercial side, I think some of those same opportunities are things we've shared with people around, hey, be careful if you find yourself headed down that path, because it can feel good in the short term and you can wake up and regret it, midterm or something like that. I don't know. Would there be other places you would think about, Roshan, different ones?
No, I think the example you had around, a whole lot of point solutions, you spend an inordinate amount of time piecing it together if you can't even do that, versus having flexibility around, you know, the solution that you may need, I think is key. And that's all predicated on the fact that anything we've done with data science, AI, machine learning, we answer one question, which leads to four others. And if you are, if you're hardbound against technologies or capabilities, then that leads you to not be able to answer the subsequent questions, and that just kind of is, not ideal. So having the flexibility is crucial.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Roshan. Uh,
Impressive presentations. We are very grateful.
yeah, and we look forward to staying in touch with our future programs. Would like to actually take offer of being at Georgia Pacific Auditorium next time which unfortunately we had to change some plans. But thanks again, and I appreciate and have a nice day with this.